Current Saturday, Sunday, Amri, Walulu, Sani, uh, Today we start with the calculation of the traffic. Uh, for example, the given example, you have been given average annual daily traffic for the vehicles that will be using in a highway, 6-lane highway, and you have to design and you have to calculate the equivalent single axle load on that highway, and the pavement have a design of 15 years. So this is the type of traffic. The truck, it's a 2-axle truck that has AADT of 76 and is growing at a rate of 4% annually. Then there is a tanker. Now this is a 3-axle tanker. We call this as tandem, single tandem. It has an AADT of 60 and growth rate of 5. Then we have a trailer that is a 4-axle trailer. We call this single tandem trailer that has got 50 ADT and a growth rate of 6%. So our first step is we need to summarize the load and axle type. So we can see that the truck has 2 axle. The first one is a single steering axle, the other is drive, and the other is trailer that we characterize. Obviously, the first truck that has been given has got 2 single axle. Again, 2 doesn't mean 2 means it is a tire. Actually, single 2 means it's also single. 1 also means single. Don't get confused with word numeral 2. So it is single. Normally, the traffic study in our region suggests that this 2-axle truck can carry a maximum load of 16 tons, and if it is empty, it has got a 7-ton load. We have a tanker that is what we call a 3-axle tanker, and now this is single tandem. 1 is single and 2 means tandem. So we call this as it has a steering axle of single axle and the drive axle is a tandem axle. It can carry a load of 32 tons when it's full, and its dead weight is, or the body weight is 11. We can say this as chassis weight as well in in the normal terminology. Then we have a trailer. We have got a 3-axle trailer here. Again, the steering axle is a single axle. The drive axle, or we call this in case of trailer, we can say this as a middle axle as well. So the middle axle is single as well, it's 2, and then it's 2 means tandem. This can carry a 40 ton of maximum load. Normally, it carries 40 ton of load, and its empty weight is 70 ton. Now, when first we summarize this type of load, then we need to know which axle carry what load, because our objective is to find equivalent single axle load on a single axle of a truck. Right now, the problem that we are solving, it has got the total load on a truck. We have to distribute that load against those National Transport Research Center vector. This is how you will tell. So, if you go with the analysis, you also know that if you have a single axle truck, 31% in on the steering axle load, and 69% on the drive axle load. So if you take us, and there are two scenarios, empty and full. For the empty, you take 7 and you take 31% of the 7, and you must be wondering how it is 4.82. It's not ton, it is kilopound. So in order to convert ton into kilopound, you have to multiply 7 by 2.2205. So if I'm calculating the load on the steering axle of the first truck, I will write 31% of 7 multiplied by 2.2205. If I'm calculating the load on tandem axle, drive axle, sorry, then it will be 69% of 7. That will be the load in tons. Since we are interested in knowing the load in kilopounds, that's why we'll multiply it by 2.2205. The same 31% and 69% will be used for carrying the loaded scenario on a truck. And if the truck is loaded, it will carry 11.01 and 24.51. And these calculations are based on 16 tons load, as you can see on step 1 above. I move on, and then it is then 21% and 79%. You don't need to learn this data. This data is already there in lecture. How much load is carried by single axle, the front axle, the drive axle, and the middle axle. We have discussed this in the last class as well. So all you can see is just calculations, simple calculation, and our objective is to calculate load on each axle of the truck. In the two scenarios, empty and loaded, and that's how you have calculated the load on each axle. Now, our objective was not to look at calculate the load on each axle. Instead, we were talking about equivalent single axle load on the highway. So, in the next step, what we are going to use, we are trying to calculate the load equivalence factor for axle type and the vehicle. So since we already know the load on the first truck is 4.82 and the allowable load is 18, and in order to calculate the load equivalence factor, we calculate the given load divided by standard load raised to the power 4.5. So you can see here 4.82 was the load on the single axle, empty condition, divided by 18, power 4.5. Similarly, Kevin 10.72 divided by 18, power 4.5 for 1.2 truck. We move on for loaded condition. Again, it was a single axle, 11.01 divided by 18, power 4.5, 24.51 and 18. Now, this is how you calculate the load on single axle if it is a single axle, load equivalence factor. But as you can see, our second truck, the drive axle is a tandem axle. So what we do is they divide a tandem axle load by standard tandem axle load, that is 32 kgs. And then raise it to 4.5 and multiply by 0.857 because we have calculated the equivalent tandem axle load. But we are interested in knowing equivalent single axle load. That's why we multiply this factor, whatever value we have got, by multiply by 0.857. And this is the factor to convert the equivalent tandem axle load to an equivalent single axle load of 80 kilo-pound, which is the objective and which is the method and which is the unit that requires by AASHTO method of pavement design to calculate the traffic. Similarly, one on your right side is same, and if you come to the the trailer axle, obviously the two middle axle and the steering axle are single. That's why we have divided by 80. And that since the last one is a tandem axle, we have to divide it by 32 first, calculate the equivalent tandem axle load, and then we'll have a 0.857 to get a load equivalence factor for this type of axle. So whatever I have done is I have calculated here, and you can see the same repetition. So if I get the actual number, I find these number, these load equivalence factor on each type of the axle. Steering axle, drive axle, all these calculations have been done in step 3. It's just the mathematic numbers. So once we do it, now what we do, we see that we add this factor, so that this will be a truck damage by this truck in empty condition. And if I sum this factor, this is a damage caused by this truck in loaded condition. Because what is load equivalence factor? It is the damage caused by the given load as compared to the standard axle. Actually, we are estimating the traffic in terms of how much damage it will cause to the pavement, and that is where once you know the extent of the damage, we will design the pavement accordingly. So the table you will see is not simply that 1.2 I add 0.00266 with 0.09708 and I am getting this value. And similarly, on the loaded side, I add 0.1094 plus 4.0116 to get this number. So all of this 1.22, I have added this value, I have got this value. Similarly, for this, I add 10 point something, 0.3492. This becomes 11 point something. 1.2-22, I've added all three factors and I have got this 0.26 factor, and this is a 12.27 factor. Now, once I do it, then what is the next step? Now, we need to calculate, we have average annual daily traffic. I say 76, I means this year, the average traffic is 76 for truck 1.2. But I have to project this factor because I am designing a pavement for 15 years. It's very simple. It's a cumulative. So if I have not got any growth factor, I say 76 multiplied by 15, simple as that. This will be the total traffic on my route after 15 years. But since we have a growth factor, We'll find a compound growth factor based on this formulation. 1 plus g power n minus 1 over g. G is the growth factor, growth rate in percent. So if you have 4% growth rate, then your G value will be written like this: 1 plus 4 upon 100 power 15 minus 1 and 4.0 divided with 100. Similarly, for tanker 1.2, nothing has changed, only G has changed. N becomes same and 5%, and that's why you will get the value of growth, this thing, and you will find this number. Once you know this number, we say what will be the future traffic. Future traffic is the number G. Whatever value we get G, I will multiply with ADT. So the last column you will find is whatever you get the numerical value of this formulation, you will multiply by ADT to get this number. Then, once we have done this, what is the next step? Now, for E cells or for a pavement, we need to multiply truck factor with the future traffic, that is G into ADT, multiply by 365. So what we have done here, I've missed out one thing. What is the one thing is that we have calculated the truck factor, and now what I've summed is here is I've summed all the factors here, all the truck factors, which I think it's not okay. Actually, we need to calculate these E cells in an empty condition, and we have to calculate the E cells in loaded conditions. But remember, for E cells in loaded condition, will take 80% of ADT, and for E cells in empty condition will take 20% of ADT. So whatever is the value will go like this. So once you do it, and then this is the E cells on whole 6 lane. But this whole 6 lane, since we did design a pavement for a single lane, that's why we'll take E cells into directional distribution that I discussed in the last class is 0.55. 6 lane facility means 3 lane in each direction. That's why lane distribution is 0.6. So for this pavement, we have to design this pavement for a 4.294 million 18 K E cells per direction per lane, right? So this is how you calculate the traffic, and I'll just stop here, and I'll ask you to just, so once the another step after calculation of the traffic is know the material properties, and this material properties is like this. We have 4 asphalt, 4 layers, 4 distinct layers of the pavement. We already know this. Let's try to summarize what are those. The first layer is asphalt bearing course. The Second layer is asphaltic base course. The third layer is the third layer is uh, the third layer is aggregate base course. The fourth layer is regular sub-base course. So the, the material we need is the first thing we need is the layer coefficient. Uh, Layer coefficient means how much this layer will behave as a structural layer. Normal asphalt concrete is not a structural layer. It is not used in a building. It's used as a structural layer in a pavement. It's not 100% concrete. It only contributes to the 40% or 44%. So this is a layer coefficient. How much a material contribute as a structural layer. Similarly, the asphaltic base course. Similarly, the asphaltic base course is also behave like this thing. It is also 0.40 to 0.44. Then crush aggregate base course, it is an unbounded layer. So it only contribute 14% as a structural layer. So these are the constants you must know. Actually, they are related with the elasticity modulus. And then we have granular subbase course, and we assume this as 10% of the layer coefficient. The normal modulus values for asphaltic base course is 0.4 million to 0.45 million. This is in comparison. This is comparison to what we have a concrete layer that is around 4 millions. So you can see that asphalt concrete is 10% less elastic than the cement concrete. The crush aggregate base course, it has a normal value ranging between 25,000 to 30,000 psi, while the granular sub-base course is between 12,000 to 15,000 psi. One thing that is also required is the drainage coefficient. The first two layers, we don't consider any drainage coefficient because we assume that our pavement is not permeable. It will not allow the water. So we could have taken this as one as well, but it's not a matter of value. The concept is we don't design asphaltic layer so that it can allow water to pass it. Though water do pass, but that's why we don't consider any drainage coefficients here. While the drainage coefficient for crush aggregate base course and granular sub-base course normally ranges from 80% to 120%. If you have a very good rain and waters are drained out in a couple of seconds, once the rain stops, then we can take this as 120%. Normally, we don't take this in our country. We take this as 80%. And if you are designing a road in a desert, then you can take 100% as well. Take one way. But because of the humidity condition in Karachi, you take around 0.8 because your pavement will always exposed to the moisture. Right? So that's the truth. So to summarize the material properties of the layers that are being incorporated in our pavement design are 4 layers: asphalt bearing course, asphalt base course, crush aggregate base course, and the granular surface course. And they are being defined. The intrinsic property that we require for a design of pavement is the layer coefficient. Again, layer coefficient means how much this layer will behave as a structural layer. So for the 2 asphaltic layer, this layer coefficient varies from 0.40 to 0.44, and you can take 0.42 as well. Take the average. 0.14 for crush aggregate base course and 0.10 for the granular surface course. Their elasticity modulus is 0.4 million to 0.45 million for 2 layers of an asphalt, while 25,000 and 30,000 and 12,000 and 15,000. Normally, if you define a material for crush aggregate base course and granular subbase course, you define this as CBR 80 and CBR 30 material, which unfortunately I have not listed here. So you can note down that the crush aggregate base course is specified as CBR 80 material. The granular CBR subbase course is specified as CBR 30 material. Now, if you go back conversely, if you convert that CBR into elasticity modulus, you will find this value of around 15,000 for granular subbase course as listed here, and CBR value of elasticity modulus of 30,000 for CBR 80 material. You must be wondering whether we define asphaltic layer in terms of CBR. No, CBR is only for the aggregate materials. For an asphaltic base course on asphaltic surface, we define the resilient modulus. This is a test that is being carried out. We have discussed this test in the class as well. Or it's a dynamic modulus test. These values are the values from the dynamic modulus test, 0.4 million to 0.45. Conversely, if you know the elasticity modulus, there are relations that you can calculate the layer coefficient. But for the context of this class, to avoid any formulation, I am just explaining it that these are the values. What we call these are the hands-on values, these are thumb values that while a professional pavement designer used here in our country. So that's why I have listed this in a series, irrespective of the background that is there. So once we do this, then we move on another step in designing a pavement is to find a structural number. The structural number is conceptually the thickness of each layer that we will be having on a pavement. So we have 4 layers. each one of its thickness. If we add them, this will be structural number. Actually, it's not simple, but just a concept. Because what we add is not the simple depth. We actually add the effective depth. The effective depth is the product of the layer coefficient and the drainage coefficient and the thickness itself. So if I find structural number, I can say structural number is the sum of the effective depth of each layer of the pavement. That's how you define the structural number. Since for pavement, we don't know D1, D2, D3, D4, all are unknown to us. That's why we use this relation to find structural number. And then once we find the structural number, we use some trial and error method or the layer stepwise method to calculate D1, D2, D3 and D4. So that's why in order to calculate the structural number, we use this equation. This equation is not reversible equation. What I mean not reversible is that actually I'm interested in knowing Sn here, but somehow I cannot find Sn by simple simplification of this equation. Here, this comes and hit a trial or optimization method in which we keep on, first we calculate the left hand side. Left hand side is the log of W18, and W18 is what we have calculated equal and single axis load that we calculated 14 million or 10 million in this class. So we'll take log of this number, log of say 10 million. This is my left hand side. On the right hand side, I have to just keep on changing the Sn value till left hand side and the right hand side become equal. Because the only unknown in this equation is Sn. What are the other number? The other number is Zr, and that is we know from the reliability value that we have discussed in the previous class. We know the standard deviation 0.45 or 0.49, between 0.40 to 0.49. That is also known. Zr is not known, but it is related with reliability. Reliability is known to us. We say it's a reliability of 95%, 99%. So for that, we'll have a value equal to Zr. So Zr and SR naught are known to us. There we come to the next part of this equation, 9.36 log 10 Sn plus 1. Sn is not known to us. So we move on. Minus 0.20 again is a number. Then this another part of this equation is log delta PSI over 1.7. Now we know delta PSI. Delta PSI is simply initial serviceability minus terminal serviceability. So it's 4.2 minus 1.5, or it is 4.2 minus 2.5. It can be 4.2 minus 2.5, or it can be 4.2 minus 3.0, depending upon which road we are designing. As I said, this is it can be 1.5, it can be 2.0, 2.5, and 3.0. Considering that we had only traffic load of 10 million, it means we are talking about some local road. If it is of say 30 million, we may be talking about an RTJ. If it is of around 20 million, we would be talking about collector road. So anything up to 10 million, it's a local road normally. So for local road, PT will calculate as 2.0. There, our delta PSI will be 4.2 minus 2.0. So that's how we know our change in serviceability index. Again, the denominator of this equation, we have Sn that is not known to us. We go on to next part of this equation, that is 2.32 log 10 of MR. Now MR is the resilient modulus of a material. So if you are talking about an asphaltic layer, then this will be, if we're talking about asphaltic layer, this resilient modulus will be 4 million. If I talk about design, the structural number for the granular subbase layer, for the base layer, we will be using the MR of the subbase layer, that is 15,000. It's like this: asphalt bearing course rest on asphaltic base course. So when we are interested in knowing the structural number of asphaltic bearing course, we will input the value of resilient modulus of asphaltic base. When we want to know the structural number of asphaltic base course plus asphaltic bearing course, then we will plug in the value of elasticity modulus of aggregate base layer. And then if we go on, to calculate the value of subbase, we'll plug in the value of subgrade. So I explained to you this equation once again. This is an irreversible equation. You cannot find Sn. The only unknown here is Sn. Now, in fact, Sn, we find Sn for all 4 layers. For calculating Sn for first layer, you know, I told you that Sn is the product of the effective depth of a pavement of a layer. It means that effective depth is the layer coefficient multiplied by the drainage coefficient and the depth itself. Since we don't know the depth, so we calculate Sn. So calculating Sn1 means the depth of an asphaltic wear course. In order to calculate Sn1, the depth of an asphaltic wearing course, we will use the MR value or asphaltic base course, that is 400,000 psi. So MR is 400. This will give us the value of Sn1. In order to calculate Sn2, Sn2 is a combination of asphaltic bearing course and asphaltic base course. And for calculating Sn2, we will use the MR value of an aggregate base course, that is 30,000 psi. So the value of MR will change as 30,000 psi. In order to calculate Sn3, now Sn3 means the 3 layers: asphaltic wearing course, asphaltic base course, and aggregate base course. And that we will use the MR of granular subbase course, that is given as 15,000 or 20,000 psi. Then last but not least, will calculate SN4, and SN4 is the combination of all the layers, and it is resting on subgrade. So we are going to use the value of sub resident modulus of subgrade, that is 2,555 into CBR 0.64. So actually SN1 means only one layer, asphaltic wear course. SN2 means two layers. SN3 means addition of three layers, and SN4 is addition of all layers. So actually SN4 is the actual SN of the pavement, right? But for the sake of calculation, we have calculated it stepwise. So once we calculate SN1, we calculate D1. From this D1, we know now D1. We will now calculate SN2. SN2 is known to you. D2 will be calculated. Similarly, somehow, this is how we are going to calculate the structural number and the depth of the pavement. So this is how what I'm saying here. The structural number is a combination of A1 into D1. You must be wondering where is the drainage coefficient. I told you that we don't consider drainage coefficient here. Okay. Mathematically, you can take this as M as 1. A2, D2, N2, A3, D3. Now this equation, actually what we do, we normally don't take value. We normally don't calculate the value of asphaltic base varicose and asphaltic base core separately. Whatever is the value of the asphaltic surface course, we keep 2 inches of asphaltic varicose and the rest is my asphaltic base. So that's why you will see here the equation that is being displayed to you is the component D1, D2, and D3. Again, all of these numbers, all of these has been defined to you, A1, D1, and M. And that, A2 and A3 you will know from the value, and again, if you plug in this value of elastic base of say 30,000 psi for elastic subbase of 15,000 psi, you will find A2, A3, or the value I have shown to you in the table is simply you will get from here, because this is normally we use in Pakistan. That's why these values are calculated and somehow memorized for the person who is using design the pavement on a daily basis. So once you know the SN value, now you calculate D1, D2, D3, D4 or D3 according to this equation. For D1, SN1 is known to you and A1 is known to you. Well, calculate D1. SN2 means for D2 you use the value of SN2 and SN1 divided by A2 and 2, you will find D2. And for D3, SN3 you have calculated, SN2 you have calculated above, and then you will find this. So whatever is that, the total SN values should be less than equal what we have calculated, more than actually. So the provided G will always be more than the required G. For instance, if you get the value of say 3.75, you round it to 4.0. If you get the value of 4.0, you round it to next 0.5, even though it's 4.0 already, but you add up these values because there may be some calculated error in driving that equation. So to be on the safer side, we always provide 0.5 higher than that. So what would happen if I have get value of 4.97? So I will again round it to 5.0. Even if it is 5.01, I will round out to 5.5. Right? So this is how we calculate the values. Explanation without an example is meaningless. So let's try to solve the example, right? Let's try to explain you this design example that will help you in learning this method of flexible pavement design. Oh, it's a, it's a big paragraph. Using the AASHTO method, design a pavement for instance interstate rural highway. It is expecting a 13 million E-cells. So you don't have to calculate E-cells now, it is given to you. The pavement is consists of an asphalt concrete, elasticity modulus of 400,000 psi. It has asphaltic base course 300,000 psi. A granular base elasticity modulus 26,000 psi, and a granular surface with elasticity modulus of 12,000 psi. The CBR of the soil is 5. You have a drainage coefficient of 0.9. Reliability is 90%. So you have an initial serviceability of 4.2 and the serviceability index is 2.5. So all is known to you. All you need is to jot down what you have in the statement. So this reliability is 90%. Standard deviation is 0.45. Right? It's not given, you can take between value between 0.40 to 0.49. I've taken 0.50 as an average. Then there is a traffic 13 million, that is also given to me. I have given PI and PG. So I always calculate delta PSI by taking the difference that I have shown here. Now this is something. Now one way is to use the equation. The other way is to use this nomograph. This nomograph is very easy. From this nomograph, we are going to calculate SN1, SN2, SN3. That is the graph that is shown from on the right hand side of the screen. We go from left to right. Our reliability is 90%. So we'll locate 90%. And then our standard deviation is 0.45. You see this scale is going down, increasing downward. So this is 0.2, this is 0.4, this is 0.6. So I say this around, this is my 0.45. I'll join 90% with 0.45 with a straight line. I will stop this at the transfer line. Now the next thing is I will find my E cell and then I will locate my E cell. I will have one point here. I will locate my E cells and I join and stop at transfer line. Right? This is 13 million. This is my 1 point. Actually, we are joining 2 points and extending the line beyond that point. So we'll join here to here and we'll stop here. Right. Now this will similar for all SN1. From here you will have 3 branch lines because for each layer you have a different residue modulus. So for the first layer, I said it's around 26,000 psi. So I located 26,000 psi here. You can read this scale 20 and 40. And it's where why we were rounding, because we cannot locate exactly the points on the graph. That's why to negate that effect, we are always concentrating on the conservative side of the value, rounding it to next 0.45 or something, right? So will join like this, and then we go perpendicular to this delta psi. We have 1.5 and we have 2.0, so we'll stop somewhere here. So what we do? So this is my, I'll go like this, then this bunch, and then I go perpendicular. I will find this is value of SN1. Then we'll have second line. Now I will use the value of aggregate base course, granular sub base course. I'll join it, go perpendicular, and I'll find SN2. Last but not least, I will use this value of CBR raised to 0.64 multiplied by 2.22255. I will get this value of around 7,157 psi that I am not shown here, but you can always calculate, and you find the SN1, SN3 value. Remember, SN3 will be higher than SN2 and SN1 because SN1 composed of 2 layers, SN2 composed of 3 layers, SN3 composed of 4 layers. That's why the last number SN3 will be always more than SN2 and SN2 will be always more than SN1. This is a conceptual check of your problem. You will never find SN1 more than SN2 and SN2 more than SN3. SN3 is always the highest number. That's how you find this thing. And so once you know your SN1, so from the graph 3.33, 4.44 and 5.0. This is how I get the value of A2 and A3 because my elasticity modulus was 26,000, 12,000 psi. So I will use this A2 and A3, and A1 value I use 0.44. I gave you the range of 0.40 to 0.44. So I've taken this as 0.4. And drainage value is 0.9 as has been given in us to us in the problem. Now, how you calculate D1? D1 is SN1 over A1, simple. SN1 is 3.3. SN A1 is 0.42, 7.9. I said whenever the value, we round it to the next number, 0.5. So it's 7.9, we round is to 0.8.0. But when we round it, then we again check that again calculate SN1. This is now SN1 asterisk. This is A1 times T1 asterisk. This is what is the provided thickness. The SN1 we have calculated is for calculated thickness. So once we know the calculated thickness, we'll calculate the provided thickness, and that always SN1, you will find SN1 asterisk more than SN1 thing. What would happen if you round off thickness and you calculate SN1 asterisk and you still find SN1 asterisk less than SN1? Then you again increase that number by 0.5. Or you can say you just keep on increasing 0.5 until you will get SN1 asterisk more than SN1. Normally we do not require, and normally not fewer times we have to add only one revision. So if 1.5 is not satisfactory, normally the second 0.5 will serve the purpose. Or in other words, increasing the thickness by 1 inch will always solve the problem. But you know, 1 inch means a lot as a cost. So that's why we don't increase 1 inches, we increase 0.5 inches steps. So once we know SN1, then we'll use this SN1 structure to find E2. Here we have this 9.6, now I'm sorry about my presentation. Actually, this should be 10.0. We go for the next item. SN2, D2 will be calculated, then T3 will be calculated accordingly from this equation. They are very trivial equations, simple algebraic equation. You are nearly a passed out batch, so I expect you to do it. So we have 8-inch asphalt concrete, 10-inch of a granular base. I just again regret what is shown here. Actually, it's 10-inch and 7.5-inch of granular. Then you have to come up with a cross section of this bed. So we stop our lecture over here and we'll actually finally stop our